Good evening, guys. Kamusta kayo? Mag-start na tayo shortly, Kamusta po? Kamusta po? Yan, kamusta mga kay Jan, mga kameta, mga kapatid, mga kapsat. Thank you so much again for all of your I say I'm never gonna grow tired of expressing my gratitude for all of the show of solidarity and love and care by everyone here and there, especially when things are a bit tough. Unfortunately, dahil sa kalagayan ng ating politika, unfortunately, dahil sa medyo mapanganib na trabaho natin, yung medyo stressful na ating mga bokasyon, if I can put it that way. It's easy sometimes to feel very isolated. It's easy sometimes to give into grief or to despair. So ito lang masasabi ko, guys, you never know how much you're encouraging someone by showing just humanity and solidarity and support. So na-appreciate ko talaga yan, especially of course dun sa minamahal natin Lola, who has joined the Lord, and of course we laid her to her final resting place kahapon. So again, thank you so much sa lahat, to Senators Gatchalian, Hontiveros, and mga other senators, to different secretaries, ambassadors, to Mayor Magalong, Senator Trillanes. Thank you so much sa lahat ng mga nag-commiserate, Senator Aquino, among others. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your kind and thoughtful comments and commiserations. I really really appreciate that. No, today balikan natin. So actually I thought, as I said, diba, as we move ahead dito sa ating channel, diba, as we build up our channel and all, we need to also evolve how we approach things. So one of the things that I'm trying to incorporate dito sa ating channel is, of course, as you know, my day job is writing articles. So as much as possible, I write article every day or so, every now and then day, and so not to mention books and all I'm working on, including a huge revision I have to do on one book, and then another book that I have to work on the return of the Marcoses and its implications, among other things. So I was thinking, at the very least, what I can do is basahin natin every Tuesday or all yung column natin sa Philippine Daily Inquirer, God willing. And of course, this week, essentially na layout ko, guys, yung argumento natin for a very long time, which is this question of whether Rodrigo Duterte can be considered as the worst president in contemporary Philippine history, if not in Philippine history. Now, worst president ever in the world, well, ibang mahabang usapan yan. Maraming mga questionable characters, rogue of gallery of rogues, and clown show around the world. But I think in the case of the Philippines, we need to have a proper argumentation about the true legacy of the Duterte administration. Now, hindi ko talaga maintindihan where some people are coming from and what are they trying to achieve by trying to besmirch or by trying to downplay yung mga contribution na ginagawa natin over the past 7-8 years. I would say easily 8 years. As some of you may know, I've written 2,000 articles over the past decade on issues concerning Philippines regional politics. And a lot of that had to do with Duterte, including at least one book about Duterte so far. My Rise of Duterte tayo, so siguro Fall of Duterte too should fall at some point in time. Not to mention millions of social media posts and hundreds of millions, if not billions, of reactions to all of those posts we have made throughout the years. Thanks to your support, we have had hundreds of thousands of followers more than 5 years, 6 years ago pa lang. So we have been very active here on different platforms expressing our concerns. And just to be clear, even during the Aquino administration, although of course I was even less known back then, if you check some of my articles on Huffington Post, among others, I was quite critical also of the shortcomings of the Aquino administration. And I had, as I said, a heartfelt, soulful conversation with the President Aquino, back in 2019, when I think he was not very appreciative of some of the criticism perhaps I made. But he's a good person, and God bless his soul. But nevertheless, Mama Sapano, response to the Yolanda crisis, lack of inclusive development, imbalanced foreign policy, lahat yan minention natin back in the day. And I stand by my arguments on all of those issues. I think people don't understand how difficult it is to be vocal, politically vocal, for people like me. I mean, as some of you know, that a huge part of my commitment is also already dealing with West Philippines related issues. No, and that is tough because you have to deal with a lot of trolling. You have to deal with threats from China and their proxies. You have to look over your shoulders whenever you visit China. I'm not sure if I'm still welcome in China. And not only China, allies of China, Russia, and other countries na allen. So you're gonna ruffle a lot of feathers if you take a strong stance on the West Philippines issue. Not to mention getting attacked and trolled by pro-Kremlin, pro-Beijing, pro all of this Axis powers kinds of nonsensical, trollish people. And yet, even though, along with people like Professor Patumpakal, Justice Scarpio, among others, we have been really trying to hold the line, hold the fort for the past few years. Ako naman, me being me, I've been also extremely active on domestic issues. And one of the biggest disappointments I had was what I felt was not strong enough pushback dun sa drug war ni Digong, and the thousands of lives that were lost by that. In fact, there were nights when, I was just staring into the ceiling and wondering what on earth is going on. If 5, 10 years from now, I was saying back then, we look back, anong ginawa natin to fight back? People also don't realize that mahirap ang media landscape sa Pilipinas. Siguro kung nasa US ako, I wouldn't have any problem, because in the United States, you are, or any mature democracies and media landscape, far from unproblematic, you are appreciated when you take a strong stance and you're articulate and eloquent and robust about your argumentation. Unfortunately, sa Pilipinas, the media landscape is very, very difficult. I don't have to spell things out, but actually also my career suffered to a certain degree because of my outspokenness. Because syempre, gusto ng mga ibang media, sabihin nila neutral sila, whatever. I mean, how can you be neutral when thousands of people are being killed? How can you be neutral if your president is kowtowing to China, among other things? So I have my disappointments and frustrations and all, but I want to move forward, and that was always my mindset. Diretso lang, move forward, look at the big picture. And I'm very glad that throughout the years, the Philippine Daily Inquirer has stood by me, including when I posted that, alam yung protest vote natin, protest column natin. Blank column, title is Duterte's Independent Foreign Policy, which I think some people already have a copy of it as a kind of a collector's item. So you imagine the kind of harassment and death threats I've been getting for the past 7, 8 years. The vehicles I use, my cars, all have been black tinted. For a long time, pag dumadaan ng motorbikes and all, nag-jitter ako. I've done martial arts and all of that. So sometimes I would practice, like, God forbid things go crazy. What should I do in terms of, you can imagine of the situations. There were times I was wondering if it were safe to go back to the Philippines. As you know, there was a time that, I was abroad. I was based abroad for personal reasons and commitments and all of that. A bit longer than usual. 2 months, for instance, in this country, 1 month in that country. And there were times I was wondering, should I come back to the country? There were times I was wondering, like, what the heck, right? What am I doing, right? Because isa sa pinakamasakit ng mga panahon na yan was, it was so lonely because very few people came to my defense. Very few people came to my, ayoko siyang balikan. You don't want to pick at the old wounds. But one of the biggest disappointments I had was whenever there were like huge attacks on me, talagang bastusan and all of that. Not only I didn't feel enough support from a lot of my colleagues or people I expected from support from, I was even, at some point, I was like, what the heck? May mga colleague pa tayo, at least isa, na sumasakay pa doon sa trolling sa akin for their own mileage. Next thing you know, Karen, na queen-queenan sila, and then nagwatak-watak sila, hindi ko na problema yan. But there was a lot of, it felt so lonely. And hindi naman ako, hindi naman ako Maria Ressa, wala naman akong Rappler, wala naman akong international connection networks or whatever. Di naman tayo in any political party for me to lean on. Hindi naman ako galing sa malaking pamilya or anything like that. And the fact that critical din ako sa Marcos dictatorship, among other things, doesn't necessarily make my Ilocano background the best fallback option back in the day. And I remember back in the day, marami mga fellow Ilocanos ko were very supportive of Digong because Digong was supposedly supportive of Marcos or something like that. Or at least, Marcos remains were buried in the, libingan ng mga bayani and all. So, it was very lonely. It was very, very difficult. And some of the things that held me together were, reading about loneliness of people like Jose Rizal. Jose Rizal, in years where he was fighting with, Marcelo del Pilar or whatever, and ina-attack din siya for not being tough enough. And then, yeah, if only Rizal known, like later on, babastasin pa siya ng mga iba na, kunyari si Bonifacio lang daw yung hero, parang as if walang ginawa si Rizal, as if hindi si Rizal yung hero ni Bonifacio. And there were also other individuals, and their lives, very, very lonely, difficult lives, meaningful lives that I had to lean on. There's this fantastic book that Leloy Claudio, my very good friend, recommended to me, The Burden of Responsibility, and especially the chapter. There are fantastic 3 chapters, and 3 lives. Biographies were covered, including Raymond Aron. These are all French figures, public intellectual figures, but one of them is Albert Camus, and how extremely lonely he was. He was almost canceled. Wala namang cancel culture. I don't know what was the version about him, but he was almost canceled because he didn't take the standard anti-colonial stance on Algeria, where he was born. But of course, he's French. So that created. So he was essentially being canceled at some point when he was not sufficiently compliant with the line of progressive leftist intellectuals at some point. So the title of book was Burden of Responsibility because at some point you just have to accept it's a very lonely path and road. And literally in my case, because wala akong barkada, people know, wala akong barkada, wala akong media company, wala akong international PR, wala akong I had to just absorb the punches on my own. And that was a big so those are the things that we're looking at no back in the day. Yan. As we speak, tinitroll na naman tayo. Yan, okay. So those were the things that we had to deal with throughout those years, no. And you would get death threats and attacks, and sometimes you're wondering who are these people, right? Are they real people? They're not. And then sometimes you realize that some of these people are actually yan, and yung mga trolls. Okay. No, babantayan ko. This space is supposed to be, malinis tong space na to. You misbehave yourself, you're out. So, if some of you wonder, bakit medyo parang minsan Karen ako or strict ako, is because I had to develop that. That was a discipline I had to develop. And then I'll tell you what, guys. 2 things. I mean, given na, of course, yung ating pananampalataya was very important. And also being inspired by these biographies. But 2 things were there. One is family and Lola, who were with me all those years and believed in me. And the other one is you guys. I mean, I remember a conversation I had with the late good friend of ours, Carlos Eldran, about how, at some point talagang binabo yung page niya, diba? Remember he had a page. binaboy yung page niya na every time he'll post something, ang daming mga comments, emojis, horrible things. So there were times he had to essentially shut down his page. Um, ako, there were times I was worried if, anong gagawin sa page ko, attack nila yan, orchestrated attack. I even had double agent friends who would tell me, "Oy, Richard, eto na, susugurin ka na yan." And back in the day, coordinated yan. Pag attack si Mocha, attack yung attack yung isa, lahat, the whole clown show circus will attack you. And then itatag ka nila and then the whole thing. It was horrible. You guys have no idea how it feels to open up your Facebook page and then you have 1,000 tags and all, and they're like saying the most horrible things about you, etc. Right? And you're like, what? Like, it's like you work so hard to be a respectable person. You work so hard. Not that I need it, but you have achieved so many things in your life. You're already writing for New York Times in your 20s and foreign affairs. You're giving lectures in top universities on earth, etc. And then babastusin ka lang ng ganyan and say horrible things. In fact, there was one time my mom's family friend shared some of the attacks on me, like horrible attacks, and my mom went ballistic and sabi, "Umayos ka, gusto mo gawin ko yan sa anak ko." Siyempre, naapektuhan din yung mami ko lang. Ang kabastusan na to, di ba? So the fanaticism, the cult and everything like that. But the tide turned. By 2018 and 19, napansin ko, barely a year after bumukas yung page natin, napansin ko, lumalaban din ang mga supporters natin. Naniwala din sa atin yung mga supporters natin. And I felt that's why the lion has to roar once in a while. The lion has to roar once in a while because you're supposed to inspire everyone to stand your ground. So when people say wag mo nang patulan, oh, you have no idea how this thing works. They're gonna swarm nila yung pages mo. Babastusin ka nila so that no one bothers to even comment or engage with your page kasi binaboy na yung page mo. So I made an executive call na I'm gonna fight as in patola isa-isa until at some point I realize may momentum na tayo. At lumalaban na rin yung may ibang tao at na-inspire na sila. So when I say dapat palaban tayo, decisive tayo and all, in my own little way, I've done that on my own pages and all of that. You can see that. Those who have been following me, especially my page, itong page, Richard Ferronde, since 2018, alam mo yan, lumalaban ako. Comment ako ng comment. Kahit alam ko this is threat undermining my career and all. Kasi syempre, sabi niya, "Richard, you work in television, you're ganon, you're not supposed to be patol." I said, no, I'm not gonna allow these people to silence me, to poison the well of public discourse. And then by 2020, 2021, I felt confident enough to keep on going, even if there was a threat of cyber libel. In fact, yung mga ibang walang hiyang, alam niyo na sino nga to, yung mga DDS, they were trying to push cyber libel cases against me because I questioned some of the COVID-19 policies of the Duterte administration. Right? So they were trying to silence us. So nakakatakot yan. And then of course, some of you know, someone was trying to also file libel against us and a couple of other academics dahil hindi na gusto. Ayoko na pumunta doon, but so imagine the things we have had to deal with. And then ginawa pa tayo ng fake case doon sa LTO. Di ba? The picture with Picasso just there. The car was stationary and then ginawa ng issue ng isang walang yung DDS dyan sa LTO. Kilala ko sino yan. Hindi ko nakakalimutan niya. Alam ko sino ka, sir. Sino yung gumawa. So pumunta ako sa LTO. I had my legal document. I had to talk to the legal team of media. I had my own legal team. I went there. Kinausap ko. Pinagalitan ko yung assistant secretary. Sabi ko, anong pinagsasabi niyo ganun, gumagawa kayo ng issue and all of that. Ayaw ako i-meet ng iba. Natakot sila. And then may nagchismis sa akin, sinong DDS ang gumawa ng kwento ng gano'n. Imagine, may picture ka ng aso sa coaches, gagawa nilang story na yung aso nagda-drive. Ganyan ka bobo. Sorry, ganun ka bobo yung ginagawa nilang legal harassment back in the day. So imagine the kind of stress and everything you have to deal with. Kaya yung humor natin, yung mga, patawa natin, this is a coping mechanism. But at the same time, this is my weapon. My humor is my weapon. My self-esteem is my weapon. My moral self-assuredness is my shield. So, I'm just telling you guys, ano yung dinaanan namin yung mga days na yan. Traumatic yan. Traumatic talaga yan. Those were one of the most traumatic years for all of us. And, of course, it's not like nangyayari lang yan at wala tayong mga ibang problema sa buhay. Yung career issues, family issues. Siyempre, andun na lahat ng mga normal problems of life. And then, idadagdag pa nila ng ganito. So I really don't understand what some people are trying to do there. Because napansin ko may mga tao dyan na hindi natuwa dun sa ating equal opportunity criticism, including constructive criticism. And they're trying to dismiss what we're doing by saying two things. One is sasabihin nila, ito si Richard, ano lang yun, nag-cloud chase yan. Parang, excuse me. I was like, what are you talking about? In my 20s already, I was already writing op-eds for New York Times. I've been already interviewing prime ministers and all of that. And I don't say this as a payabang. I'm just saying, napaka-bobo yung argument. Like, what do I need to prove? I've been just interviewing two foreign ministers in the past few weeks. I don't need any social media mileage to get these people. These people, have interviews with me because of my writings on legit media outlets, from Nikkei Asia to Washington Post to whatever, right? For my academic works and everything like that. So, napansin ko yun yung isang line of attack ni iba because they cannot question my argument. They know may basihan yung sinasabi natin. And the other attack that I've seen is some people trying to even question whether we were fighting the good fight. So kanina parang naisip ko, sino tong epal na to? Ang pangalan nito, Wilfredo Garrido. Sino ba yan? Nakita ko, ito pala yung parang nag-bash parati kay Chloe and Kaloy. Sino tong mga epal na to, di ba? And then they're like people commenting, akala mo sasabihin niya, pakit lang daw kami all those years. Wala daw kami sinabi sa EJK, mga ganun. Like, sino tong mga to? I mean, what the heck? Who are these people? Who are these people? Di ba? The reason I pointed out this person and I had to call this person out is because alam ko maraming may click na ganyan na they want to silence you and they want to question your moral ascendance or anything like that. Excuse me, sir. Ikaw, hindi ko alam kung anong kuweba ka nakatira noong time na yan. Obviously, hindi ka nagbabasa ng mga legit media. Obviously, hindi ka nagfa-follow sa millions of posts and criticisms ko. Pero 2017, 2016 pa lang may criticism na ako sa drug war. Alright? I have written books and how many journal articles on Duterte's drug war and all of that. I mean, so I don't know what these people are trying to achieve, to be honest. And yun nga, as if hindi sapat, no? As if hindi sapat na binastos kami, tinetreaten kami, dinetret kami, na legal harassment kami nung 6-7 years na yan. And then yung mga iba dyan, na nagpe-pretend pa sila na opposition sila and voice of reason, babastusin kami. Nakakabastos yan, guys. Nakakabastos yan. Dinamay pa si Professor Batong Bakal. Wala daw ambag yung ginagawa namin sa China and all of that. I'm calling this out, guys, because I'll tell you what. There was a point in my life I made a decision. I said, ayoko maging bitter na tao. Ayoko yung maging parang paawa, deep. No, I said, if I see something wrong, I will call it out. If I see epal, I will call it out. And if I feel sometimes I'm doing epal, I'll also recalibrate and try to call myself out or be open to criticism. And ang dami kong kilala na sobrang matatalinong tao, sobrang galing, daming nagawa para sa bayan. And then, napansin nila, hindi sila na-appreciate, pinolotika sila, gano'n. And then next year, depressed na lang sila, nag-withdraw na lang sila, umalis na lang sila ng bansa. And I made an executive decision. I said, I'm not gonna be that kind of person. If I feel something wrong is happening, I'm gonna call it out. If I feel there are people who are just toxic, who are just being foolish, who are just trying to, make people are doing the right thing feel horrible. Of course, no one is perfect, but you have to call it out. You have to call it out. You shouldn't allow these people to just get away with it, right? It's very, very important. And then one day, di mo alam, baka ibang tao may inspire din to do that. Kasi alam ko, I'll tell you what. Kasi may napansin ako na napansin ko yung kultura natin sa Pilipinas is syempre, 'di ba, hinahinay lang ganyan. At saka napansin ko yung ibang tao, they think Amerikano tayo or something like that. Konyo lang naman. No. Ako, I just felt, you just have to call out if something is wrong and all of that. And I don't care kung anong kampo ka or anong pretend na kampo ka, etc. And for me, more importantly, etong mga tao na toxic, etong mga tao na gusto mag-cancel culture, etong mga tao na binabastos yung mga lumalaban. Hindi ko alam kung sino itong mga tao na ito, mga nobodies yan, obviously. Pero kami nasa frontline, na binabastos kami, binababoy kami, inaaway kami, gano'n. The least you can do is, shut up ka na lang kung wala kang masabi maganda, di ba? Ganun lang kasimple yan, di ba? But anyway, the reason I'm doing this is because we have to create a culture whereby we call out nonsense. We call out nonsense. And sometimes my nonsense was called out. Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that. So, hindi ko pinapakita minsan, pero actually, iniisip ko yun, oh nga, no, sana, dapat di ko sinabi siguro yan, or dapat di ko ginagawa yan. So, okay, we just have to call it out. Hindi pwedeng hayaan mo lang. Diyan nagkakaroon ng abuso eh, yung mga hayaan mo lang. Speaking of hayaan mo na, at call out mga abuso, I've been doing this for a very long time. And for a very long time, my argument has been that for all his popularity, Digong could easily be considered as among the most problematic, questionable, and some would even say the worst president we have had, if not in the world. But before we go there, let me just lay out the predicate, no? Dun sa mga iba nagmamaganda na ito si Hidan walang sinasabi. At the height of the pandemic, when Duterte had almost dictatorial power, right? At the height of pandemic, when Duterte could do anything to anyone, there was no scrutiny of budget, there was lockdown, dun sa aming barangay sa QC dati, yung may armored vehicle here and there. It was horrible. You cannot even move around and all of that. I openly said that Duterte's mismanagement of the COVID pandemic and everything that went wrong before that is going to set the Philippines back for years. And it's going to be a damage that we'll have to live with for a very, very long time, unfortunately. And nakita nyo, di ba? Ito. This is the article I wrote. O, dun sa mga, yung dun sa isang syunga na, na epal na, ayan. This is what I wrote. At the height of the pandemic, yun ang sinulat ko. Duterte's COVID-19 blunders will set the Philippines back generations. This is on Nikkei Asia. And I'll tell you what, it's a big deal when you write on Nikkei Asia. Bakit ka mo? Back in 2017, I wrote a piece on Nikkei Asia because this is the biggest, it owns also Financial Times of UK. This is the biggest business newspaper in the world, right? And newspaper in Japan. I'm sorry, one of the biggest English language newspaper now, and one of the biggest in the world. Going back to this, I actually wrote something about Duterte's economic policies blunders in 2017-18 pa lang. And the Department of Finance attacked me, right? So, to tell you, it's very risky to write for international publications na ganon. Dahil, aatakin ka ng administration because they know may audience yan, may influential audience yan. So this is a 2018 column. Article on Philippine Star. Department of Finance and columnists spar over Philippine economy health. So ito So the Department of Finance on Tuesday slammed academic and author Richard Haydaran for his comments on the Philippine economy, which was, he said, suffering from the fallout of the public. I was criticizing yung tax policies ni Digo, mga ganyan. So this is the kind of harassment that we had to deal with for a very, very long time. For a very, very long time. So for me to write on the same newspaper, which triggered the DOF response, at the height of the pandemic, can you imagine how much stress, how much risk that was? And to give you an idea, I won't say which Southeast Asian country. There was another columnist on Nikkei Asia who wrote a piece. The next day, sinampahan siya ng libel ng government niya. Mayaman na bansa to sa ASEAN. Yun ang pinakamayaman na bansa sa ASEAN. Alam niya anong bansa yan. Na libel case siya. So, I really don't understand what some of these people are trying to achieve. Now, etong Garrido, whatever, mga epal yan, wala, nobody yan. But in general, I know there are people out there who are trying to do that, to silence the rest of us, to try to impose their... So sa aking palagay, sagabal sila sa ating bayan, sa progress ng ating bayan. Sagabal sila sa progress, sa pag-asenso ng opposition. Etong mga ganitong tao ay sila yung nakakasira sa opposition. I'll tell you what. Right? So bago sila magsalita sino opposition or hindi, and who's doing their job, sigurado nila dun sa mga kaepalan nilang comments kay halos lahat na lang Chloe Caloy every other day. Umayos kayo dyan. Okay? Umayos kayo dyan. At kung ano yan, mag-call out ko ulit yung mga yan. I never get tired of calling out these people. Alright? So, epal. Now, let's go back to the tell of the tape. Let me first read my column, and then we'll break it down. Okay, so the title is Duterte, worst president ever? It's a question mark. Okay, see, I'm nice. It's a question mark. Basahin natin. Not long ago, the ultimate turncoat in Philippine politics slyly boasted of the so-called Duterte magic. Alam niyo sino yan. His characteristically sycophant intervention came shortly after his patron, Vice President Sara Duterte, indulged in a Digong-style chutzpah by claiming that as many as three Dutertes will be running for the country's highest chamber next year. As Sarah put it, all of them, yung mga kapatid niya, Baste, Polong, are planning to run for Senate. And of course, kasama din yung tatay niya. She told reporters during a visit to Cagayan de Oro in late June. I think this was also the Pride Month. Sebastian Basta Duterte will run for senator and then he will run in 2028 for president, ayon kay Sara Duterte. It was a calculated show of force as she steadily styled herself as an opposition leader and crucially prepared for a direct clash with the legislature for the annual budget hearing, meaning both Congress and the Senate. And yet, over the next 3 months, however, the Dutertes would have a rude political awakening. On one hand, Sara Duterte would be repeatedly exposed, if not humiliated, in various legislative hearings, which only strengthen the case for her impeachment, which most likely will come after the elections next year. Her approval and satisfaction ratings also suffered significantly, with now, according to Pulse Asia, barely a third of Filipinos in the National Capital Region sympathizing with her. The only reason her numbers are not way worse is that she almost has 100% support in Mindanao. As for, speaking of, ex-human rights lawyer Jairo Roque, well, effectively, he's a fugitive right now. The collapsing fortunes of the House of Duterte were on full display during the filing of the certificate of candidacy for next year's elections. Recognizing their dismal numbers in authoritative surveys, neither of Sara's brothers dared to run for a national post. If you look at Baste and Polong's rankings in Pulse Asia, Okta, or SWS, malayo, not even competitive. In short, not even worth for them to try. The family's patriarch, meanwhile, meaning Rodrigo Duterte, flirted with the idea of running for senator, but eventually decided to sidetrack his bumbling son, whose legendary incompetence and vacuous populism created a dangerous opening for rivals. Famed for their smarts and calculation, the Nograleses made a bold yet very calculated bid to take over Davao's top offices next year. As you know, the Nograles Duterte feud drama has been going on for the past 3 decades, but Dutertes have come on top most of the time, except on some congressional district fights. And that's why the congressional side of the race seems more competitive, meaning Pulong versus Mig Nograles, given the Nograles' historical strength in the congressional race. But even the mayoral race could turn out interesting if Duterte's rivals end up receiving all-out support from the well-oiled administration. Of course, kalaban ngayon ng mga Duterte's administration and everyone else, so you know who's going to support the Nograleses. It goes without saying that the mild-mannered Carlo, well, this is a unsolicited advice, who served as Duterte's former cabinet secretary, someone that actually I interviewed when I was in GMA Network, should adopt a more feisty and formidable campaign if he's to stand any chance of fulfilling his family's long-held political drama. As you remember dun sa isang RM episode natin, Ronald Llamas remains very skeptical that Carlo Nograles has any chance. But I think both of us agree that Migs Nograles has a better shot at this. Nevertheless, Duterte is not getting any younger. If anything, he looks more frail, aged, and vulnerable than ever. So even if the patriarch retains his dynasty's grip on the top provincial office, the long-term prospect for the Dutertes is potentially grim. The much-vaunted Quad Committee, Quadcom hearings have created game-changing exposés which could eventually bring down the House of Duterte. To begin with, Kerwin Espinosa simply confirmed what every sound mind already knew throughout the years, namely how the former administration just cooked up false charges against critics such as former Senator Laila de Lima. Now, for some of the fools who have been questioning whether I was courageous enough to call things out, ask Senator Laila de Lima how I stood by her throughout the years, and I've been consistently standing by her and her innocence throughout all those years. And that's why, I have a lot of respect for her, and I hope that this is something reciprocal. But the true bombshell was the testimony of Duterte's alleged former lover, former policeman Roye Nagarma. Ayan, nagarma na sila. Exposed the entire architecture of mass murder under the former president's drug war. Ayon sa kanya, The deval model involves three levels of payments or rewards. First is the reward if the suspect is killed. Second is the funding of plan operations. Third is the refund of operational expenses. Yun ang sinabi niya sa Quadcom last week, implicating not only former President Rodrigo Duterte, but also henchmen slash alalay slash assistant slash kasulat ni Christopher Bongo. And here we are. I know may mga trolls dyan, yung mga trolls na last year pa nila sinabi na may polvoron video sila kaya pero hanggang ngayon walang mapakita ngayon. Pinagtatawanan yung sinabi natin na yung ICC development on September. Relax lang kayo, papunta tayo sa exciting part. Huwag kayo masyadong excited. But, let me tell you this. The potential entry of the International Criminal Court later this year could still seal the deal, especially for Duterte's other hapless henchman, Bato de la Rosa, aka Pebbles. Now, even if ICC doesn't come in, even if BBM will not cooperate with ICC, although my suspicion is they will let Quadcom and all take care of this, and then later on perhaps let the ICC come in. In fact, a similar position has been taken by the administration whereby ang argument nila is that wag muna natin i-extradite sa Kiboloy, let's try him here, and then let's see later on. So let's see how things go. So dun sa mga excited dyan, Richard, pinagtatawanan tayo. Saan na yung pulveron video niya kay BBM? Last year niyo pa sinasabi yan. Hindi yung mga fake, cheap fake ha. I'm talking about legit stuff. So, please lang, huwag kayong magmaganda. But anyway, huwag naman kayo masyadong excited. Papunta naman tayo dyan eh. To put things into perspective, Duterte oversaw more alleged extrajudicial killings in his first 4 years in office than almost 2 decades of dictatorship under Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Mga DDS, kayo nagpanalo sa Marcoses, kayo nagpabalik sa Marcoses. Kami, consistent naman kami. Critical pa rin kami sa Marcos dictatorship. And unless you live also in a cave or kasing epal niyo yung mga iba na minention natin kanina, you would have noticed na actually we have been very critical of a lot of Marcos policies, including Maharlika Fund, including lack of decisiveness on a lot of issues, including the PhilHealth scandal, and a lot of other issues that we have to also cover here. But the argument here is, who is worse, Marcos Sr. or Duterte? Well, this is the fact. This is the fact of the case. Duterte oversaw more EJKs per the reports. I think using the word allegation is a little bit too much giving benefit of the doubt by this point. I think we already know what has been happening. In office, he did more EJK allegedly than Marcos in 2 decades. In fact, Marcos had to become dictator before doing a lot of these horrible things. This guy didn't even bother. That tells you, had Duterte become a dictator, full-fledged dictator, good luck na lang sa atin. And unlike any of his contemporaries, for that matter, and this is the big difference with Marcos Sr. Nakita ko may mga nagmamaganda dyan saying something about, but Marcos Sr. normalized ties with China. Like, yeah, he did it after the United States, okay? He did it after the United States. The U.S. already started normalization of ties with Maoist China in the early 1970s so that they can build a common front with China against Soviet Union. Please lang, all right? And please check my long interview with Professor Jay Batambakal, also from UP. We had a long conversation that, in fairness, for every horrible things that Marcos Sr. did on economy, on human rights, everything, corruption, there's one thing that he really got right, and that's Pag-asa Islands and West Philippine Sea. It was under Marcos Sr. that we built those facilities in Pag-asa in the West Philippine Sea. 1977 pa lang, we were already building our airstrip and facilities there. Now, contrast that to the slavish position of Duterte towards China. Not to mention, as pinag-usapan natin ng masinsinan kahapon, yung polisiya ni Digong sa mga pogo, the worst form of Chinese influence, which even the Chinese government opposed. And yet Duterte stood by. Alam na natin nangyari doon, di ba? Connect the dots. So unlike any of his contemporaries, for that matter, Duterte unabashedly kowtowed to China, which has been colonizing our exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea. West Philippine Sea, our exclusive economic zone, that's non-debatable. Ibang usapan na yung ICJ and status of territorial disputes, etc. But actually, hindi po territory ang Second Thomas Shoal, for instance. So China has no business whatsoever there. So hindi ko maintindihan doon sa mga makapili na yan. We'll talk about the makapili shortly. Duterte was not only as indolent and unstatesmanlike as Joseph Estrada. Let's be honest, alam ko maraming mga jokes about Estrada being tamad or alam mo na, but Digong was, not very hardworking after all. It was travel all the time. It was uwi kagad all the time. But he also oversaw corruption scandals, alleged corruption scandals, formally. and other sorts of irregularities, not to mention all-out assault on our constitutional order that echoed the notorious Gloria Macapagal Arroyo presidency. I had to also mention this because I think some people think Arroyo was the worst president. Well, she had the worst approval rating. Hello, Garcia. I'm sorry. His singular mismanagement of the COVID 19 also meant one of the worst economic recessions in the world. We had 5 quarters of recessions from 2020 to 2021, and our recession was worst in Asia and, of course, definitely in Southeast Asia. We had more than 9% GDP contraction, which is worse than all our neighbors and peers in the entire developing world. And also the mismanagement, meaning, remember si Duterte, ang late niya na impose yung travel restrictions on China? Oh, alam niyo na bakit? By that time, nag-spread na yung COVID-19 ng big, big, big time. So he came in late with travel restrictions and then he overdid it. He brought it down with a hammer and killed a lot of businesses and works and hence the economic damage. The list is long. We can talk about all sorts of different horrible things that happened during Duterte presidency. But having said that, I'm fair to the guy. If you look at my column, for instance, in 2019, title is Duterte's finest moment. I actually praise Duterte dun sa kanyang Bangsamoro policy. I think if there's one area where I think Duterte did the right thing was to show at least on paper and at least in policy some sort of I don't know why I'm getting a hiccup. He showed some sort of sympathy and compassion for our Moro brothers and sisters. That was a courageous act. But I was in Marawi. I visited Marawi in 2019, and for anyone who's visited Marawi until now, look at it. Hindi pa rin naayos ni Digong. Digong had how many years to fix Marawi, and yet hindi niya naayos. So this is a person who made promises right and left. This is a person who said in 3 to 6 months I'm going to finish crime. If I didn't do it, kill me, whatever. And then look at what the kind of country left behind. And now, makita natin, all of this Quadcom, all of this expose show na fake pa yung drug war. Yung drug war na yan, more like war. Para siyang war na on drugs. Hindi yung war on drugs na drugs yung, parang war na on drugs na parang bara-bara. Bara-bara, no? This country, now, none of that means that I'm gonna say all the other presidents were great. No. As I said, Aquino, they bungled Zambonga, they bungled Masapano, not a very good management of inclusive economic growth, not very balanced policy in West Philippines. So, wag kayong magmaganda dyan. I actually criticize already those administrations. I criticize Arroyo administration even if related. Tita. I cri- kaya nga sabi ko, for all contemporary presidents, I think Ramos is the best. But it's a very low bar. Very low bar. And Ramos had a lot of issues we can talk about. So I think this country has yet to have a truly great leader, someone we can be truly proud of, kind of Mandela-like figure, Lincoln-like figure. But I can't blame if some people think Duterte is the worst president we have ever had. So this is the column I had, and you're free to check it out. And it looks like a lot of people responded to it. I didn't post it kanina kasi siguro bukas ko na yung post kasi kanina my focus was posting my eulogy for Lola. And you know me, I'm quite sensitive about creating sacred spaces, you know. Why am I having hiccup? Sabi ng iba, supra worst. Meron ng meron ng new category na supra worst. Now, your Armando de los Santos, kung bored ka, di umalis ka, di ka namin kailangan. Ayan. Dami na tamaan talaga dito sa discussion natin. I don't know why I'm having hiccup. Baka siguro, I must be exhausted. As you can see in my eye bags and all of that. 3 weeks na kami, Lola was 2 weeks in ICU. It's more than a week since she had her CPR and passed away now. So maybe I have to get myself together. So thank you so much, guys, again for listening to us. Let me just say before I wrap up this discussion. Every criticism I make is still from a position of compassion, is from a position of compassion. I've been to different parts of the country, many parts of the country, from Mindanao to, of course, Ilocos Norte and beyond. And what I can say here is this: we have wonderful people, and from Lawag in Ilocos all the way to Davao in Mindanao, I've seen nothing but kind people, loving people, people who care about our country and all of that. So, despite all of this criticism I make of the political leaders from from different parts of the country, right? This was never a judgment on our great people. And I, particularly in Davao, I had fantastic experience in Davao. I gave a talk back in the day in Ateneo de Davao. It was one of the most amazing experiences I had. You know, all different representative from all different faculties were there. We had fantastic discussions. Folks I met, including airport, yung mga guards, ganon, yung iba, medyo na-recognize tayo. They were extremely nice. Everyone was so hospitable. Iba talaga yung mga ating mga Bisaya na kapatid. Very, very hospitable. And I had amazing time, amazing food. I found Davao very clean, very disciplined and orderly and all of that. At the same time, I have no illusions about the policies that the Duterte used in order to stay in power. So for me, even if you support Duterte, even if you support Marcos, etc., that's not a final judgment on who you are. I'm gonna disagree with you in terms of who you vote for, etc. But at the end of the day, I judge you as a person. First of all, who am I to judge you? But I assess you as a person in terms of your entirety of your stance on things. So when I posted something about, folks in Davao. Kasi may mga fanatic naman talaga na feeling nila Digong was the best. So sabi ko, kung sa tingin nyo Digong is the best, then keeping to yourself. Bakit nyo pa dinala dito? Hindi naman applicable yung Davao model sa ibang lugar eh. Ako taga Baguio. Hindi naman applicable sa amin sa Baguio yung mga ginagawa sa Davao. So sana next stay na lang siya doon. If you think is great. But at the same time, if you look at it, you have options. Now, trapo din yung, I mean, dynasty din yung kabila, but you have options. For me, kasi it's never good when one family is always in charge of the city. I mean, this is a good thing I love here. This is one thing I love here. I love here about Baguio. Walang dynasties in charge for a long time. There used to be a one or two dynasties, but hindi rin full-fledged dynasties. The beauty we have here in Baguio is that paiba-iba yung mga mayors natin throughout the years, in a sense that different people, different approaches, different methods are given a chance. Now, Baguio is not perfect. We have a lot of problems and all of that, but we're opinionated people. We are responsible citizens, and we want to do things our way. We want to do things in an educated way, in the right way. So sana katulad namin, sobrang nakakainis, napaka third world or fourth world. Kung isang pamilya lang in charge ng city nyo over and over again. And then purong gumagamit lang ng confidential funds, or worse, gumagamit ng death squads or what have you. So I just think the Dutertes do not necessarily represent the great people of Davao. And even though I know they're beloved in Davao, of course, with the climate of fear and all those years in power, I always separated that from my opinion of Davao as a beautiful city and the beautiful people of Davao. And I hope that this time they really have a good choice. This time they really have alternatives, and hopefully they'll make the most out of it. At the end of the day, even if we don't politically agree with each other, whether you're kakamping or DDS or whatnot, I hope naintindihan nyo na dapat magkakaroon talaga tayo ng diskusyon. Pwede tayo mag-disagree, pwede tayo mag-debate, pwede natin pag-usapan saan galing ang ating mga pananaw, pero suriin natin na mabuti. At sana magkakaroon din tayo ng safe spaces where we can have this kind of conversation. Kaya ako, I'm very particular. I'm very, very particular with making sure we take care of the trolls and all of that, because they try to poison our democratic discourse well. And in the same way, I also call out yung mga toxic na pa-opposition and all of that, who are also giving a bad name to opposition. Because all of these ones, the trolls on the right and then yung mga epals from the left or whatever, all of them ay sagabal sa pag-asenso ng ating bayan. On that note, thank you very much. Maraming salamat. You can see medyo nag-blush na tayo. That's a sign na I'm tired and exhausted. And alam mo na, mga Baguio boy, nag-blush kami. On that note, thank you very much. Maraming salamat, whether Team Fentanyl, whether Team Pulver, whether Luga, whatever kayo. Mahal na mahal namin kayo at maraming salamat sa inyong ah, patuloy na suporta dito sa maliit natin programa at channels dito. Bukas po kasama po natin si Justice Scorpio. Pag-usapan natin Quadcom, pag-usapan natin West Philippine Sea, pag-usapan natin si Kibaloy, Duterte's Nograles and Davao Politics. And then sa Thursday po, kasama naman natin si Kristan. So it will be RRM plus Kristan. I think everyone is looking forward to that. As I said, one of the things I love is collaboration together. All right? And that's what I do. Now, yung iba ayaw nila mag-collaborate, problema nila yan. Not my loss. Thank you very much. God bless and talk to you soon. Salamat po. Thank you very much. Dun sa mga troll, tanggalin ko na kayo isa-isa ha. Ayan, Yets. Troll ka pa dyan. Bye-bye. By the way, yung mga positive comment and all, relax lang kayo. I am reading you guys. Okay, sorry na lang kung minimension ko yung mga trolls. I'm just trying to tell all of you that, we do this legit. We do this legit. And we want to keep this as sound and safe as possible for everyone. So maraming salamat sa mga nag-send ng stickers and support. And of course, commiserations and your thoughtful messages. Really appreciate that. Sana tuloy-tuloy yung supportan niyo. So don't forget, of course, to follow us on Spotify, Richard Hidarian, Deep Dive with Richard Hidarian. Libre lang yan. And also to give us rating and all of that para tuloy-tuloy lang ang pag-post natin and all of that. God bless and talk to you soon. Maraming salamat. God bless.